Police in Japan have arrested Mark Capellas, the CEO of a failed Bitcoin exchanges until last year. It lost millions worth of Bitcoins, leaving angry investors without their money.
I had no idea who he was. Mark Capellas, some guy who has a first Bitcoin exchange, and he's sitting on top of, almost $1 billion worth of money. And where did it go?
Avant de faire parler de lui dans le monde entier, Mark Karpeles a grandi à Dijon. Sa mère nous raconte le parcours de ce génie de l'informatique.
Mon ambition, c'est de devenir maître du monde, mais je pense que je ne suis pas le seul.
This whole burgeoning ecosystem and technology was essentially entirely dependent on this, 20-something French guy sitting there in Tokyo, with his cat.
Là, il parle de l'homme qui est aujourd'hui le plus détesté d'Internet.
All of a sudden, this website just crashes and burns, seemingly out of nowhere.
Alors ça, c'est un bouton d'autodestruction.
We're up to 1 million accounts, so it's a hell of a lot of people out there who've got reason to be angry.
Donc, il faut activer les 3 éléments dans l'ordre.
This is almost more like a Wild West robbery.
Et
Just imagine a bank you can trust. A bank that knows.
Imagine above all, a world without banks or bankers. A world in which the governments no longer control their currencies or its value. This new world is a currency. Digital, free, universal. As easy to use as a credit card, but as discreet as cash. And its name is Bitcoin.
Are you ready to bypass the system?
In 2008, this was a period of financial crisis. The system almost failed again. But the central banks came to the rescue, printed trillions of dollars to bail out the banking systems and all the large mortgage holders. There were bailouts all over the world.
It created this whole new desire to have a financial system that existed outside the bounds of Wall Street, outside the bounds of central banks. There was this desire to kind of return money back to the people.
At the time, there was a small group of people that were working on the idea of a new digital money that would be entirely private, be not connected with the government, be global, and purely digital.
The immediate reaction to thinking about electronic cash is that it can't be possible, because if it's digital, you can make a copy of it. If I make a copy of it, then aren't there two of them now? Like, it just naturally wants to fit in your brain.
And it was 2008 when Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a pseudonym for somebody else, or maybe several people, we still don't know, but came up with this idea of a ledger. A ledger that would belong to everybody, that everybody could see. And there would be a protocol to enter and exit the ledger. And there would be a very carefully scripted algorithm that how many of this new unit called Bitcoin could be created.
When you start reading about the blockchain and distributed ledgers, it just clicks like, oh wow, there really is this way to do this decentralized authentication of transactions where you really could have a digital cash system. And then it sort of turns on another part of your mind to this whole world of possibilities that weren't possible before. It was very apparent to me early on that it was going to be a big deal.
The very first product that I bought was a pair of pliers. I didn't need pliers, but that was the first thing and I was in a hurry. So I clicked that and I said, okay, now scan this code, this QR code. So I scanned it and sent us some money. So I sent it and they said, your transaction is done. And really, I had a sense, like a breathless sense. They didn't know my name. They didn't have to know my identity. It wasn't based on a trust relationship. They didn't have to access my credit history. Nothing matters except that I owned something. So you have to understand, it was like a cash transaction, except the person I'm transacting with is not in front of me. The person is somewhere else, could be anywhere in the world. Nothing like that has ever been possible in the history of the world. And when I realized this, I thought, I can't believe this. I can't believe this just happened. So I got up and I remember just dancing around my dining room table, just kind of like doing a little dance going, that's the future. I just saw the future. And I realized at that moment, if this works, the relationship between the individual and the state and our whole public lives are going to change forever. When? I don't know, but it's going to happen.
Bitcoin was really fed by some of the same philosophical impulses as the internet, and also some of the same sort of technological concepts as the internet. Both are really, on a technological level, about taking power away from the center. At the core, the internet and Bitcoin are really about decentralizing power.
Un des slogans du mouvement cyberpunk d'il y a très longtemps, qui imagine un avenir assez sombre, c'est « Information wants to be free ». L'open source, Linux, Internet, et donc Bitcoin ensuite, sont les outils principaux qui peuvent nous permettre d'améliorer le monde et d'apporter un peu plus de véritable liberté aux gens.
If you study economics, you realize the more economic freedom people have, the higher their standard of living. If you or I print a bunch of money in our basement and go around town spending it, we would go to jail for counterfeiting because it's economically destructive and is stealing from everybody else. When governments do the exact same thing, when they print a bunch of money, it doesn't change what it is. It's stealing, and it's wrong for the exact same reason. And as a voluntarist and a libertarian, I have a huge, huge problem with that. So the invention of Bitcoin strips that power away from every single government in the entire planet to do that.
Je ne suis pas anarchiste, il ne s'agit pas de supprimer totalement l'État. L'État est quand même utile. Mais je pense que si le peuple reprend le contrôle de la monnaie, il est possible qu'on puisse remettre l'État à sa place.
Bitcoin could mean different things to different people. One of Bitcoin's strengths is that, it had all these different elements to it, and somebody could be into it because of the political aspect, and somebody could be into it because of the, technological advances that it made, and everybody could, kind of have their own connection.
La seule fois où j'ai vraiment changé le monde, c'est en disant une seule phrase à Marc. Il faut absolument que tu jettes un œil à Bitcoin, je suis sûr que ça va trop te plaire. Au moment où j'en parle à Marc, Bitcoin c'était totalement amateur. C'était vraiment un petit truc de geek, de gamin, c'était un jouet presque. Même si techniquement derrière il y avait quelque chose de génial, le monde qui se construisait autour, c'était presque un jouet, un jeu. C'était pas encore sérieux, c'était pas encore suffisamment sécurisé au niveau des sites web, etc.
Certainly in the first few years, the typical Bitcoiner was a guy who spent most of his life in front of his computer, and not a whole lot of time with other humans. But these were people who kind of lived to one degree or another, sort of in their own world and could inhabit this abstraction, which was this new money. There was no reason to think it would work, and so you had to be a little weird to devote any time to this.
J'ai une culture de programmation, mais quand je suis rentré dans le code de Bitcoin, à lire le code, la logique, c'est quand même quelque chose de techniquement très comprendre. Mais j'y aurais passé 1 an ou 2. Marc, a priori, pendant 2 mois, il n'a pas beaucoup parlé sur le chat. Quand il est revenu, il avait tout compris. Donc il a vraiment dû découvrir quelque chose et voir qu'il y avait un avenir, voir que techniquement c'était fiable, sécurisé, utile.
You know, I got into economics because I realized the quality of money has a lot to do with the quality of our lives. You get the money wrong, you get everything wrong. With Bitcoin, we have a chance to get the money right. And it can liberate the world. At least 1/3 of humanity is unbanked today. This provides them financial power, access, a chance for a better life for everybody, equally, democratically, all over the world, regardless of race, sex, religion, nationality. I mean, that's awesome. That's beautiful. That's utopia to me.
We don't like uniforms too much. Of course, when Mark bought Mt. Gox, he'd expect to end up 4 years later handcuffed to the back of a cop car. Did you, Mark? Huh? Whatever. Beginning in 2011, Mt. Gox became the first credible internet site to exchange dollars into bitcoins. The thing is, at the time, well, a bitcoin wasn't worth $1, so let's be honest, nobody really gave a fuck. But just a few short months later, the media dragged Bitcoin out of the shadows, and Mt. Gox went from 3,000 to 60,000 clients in just a matter of weeks. And that was the beginning of the glory days. Pas vrai, Mark? Isn't that right? Mark!
Mt. Gox was the first place where you could turn your fiat currency into Bitcoin. It was the exchange. There wasn't really an alternative. Mt. Gox was the bank of Bitcoin, essentially.
They had like 98% of the world's market share. If you think of Bitcoin as being an island, at that time, Mt. Gox was the only bridge to the rest of the economic world.
The growth at Mt. Gox was very quick as we saw, very large increase in users. The first few months after I joined, it started changing and we were getting a lot more structure and actually overseeing a lot of the business side of the company.
As time went on and Bitcoins became more valuable, people would leave larger deposits for a longer amount of time in Mt. Gox. So someone might have $10,000 or $15,000 in their account at Mt. Gox and have it there for 2 or 3 months while they were waiting for a good time to trade for Bitcoins. So Mt. Gox became very popular very quickly, became very successful very quickly.
Mark was always a believer in Bitcoin and he really thought that, this could do something and he really wanted to make the company work. He was always in front of a computer late at night, early in the morning, and when he'll be in the office for a long time, it seemed like he was always busy and stressed out, but that he was always doing something and trying to actually make Bitcoin into something very useful in the future because he really believed in it, and he did talk a lot about it. Mt. Gox is like, you know, I want to say like his baby.
私はカルプレス・マルク・マリ・ロベルトと申します。1985年6月1日、フランスのシュノーブという町で、マントゴックスでは代表取締役として勤めてたんですね。Quand j'ai pris Mongox, on était, je crois, à 2000 ou 3000 comptes clients. En fait, 2 ans après, on a atteint le million de clients. Donc, c'est une évolution qui est assez rapide. Et je pense pas qu'il aurait été possible à qui que ce soit d'imaginer que ça se serait passé comme ça. En fait, Mongox n'est pas vraiment une banque, vu que la fonction de Mongox n'est pas de stocker ou de contenir des comptes où les gens déposent leur argent pour les laisser. Quand quelqu'un dépose, par exemple, de l'argent sur Mongox, c'est dans le but d'acheter des bitcoins pour ensuite les retirer et les utiliser quelque part ou les garder chez lui. Après, je sais pas exactement comment les clients, eux, voyaient ça. Moi, forcément, au niveau de Mongox, le fait de voir autant de bitcoins stockés, déjà, ça m'empêchait de dormir la nuit. J'ai dû mettre en place tout un système de surveillance.
Mt. Gox, I think, was trusted as the place that people could manage their bitcoins, could manage their money. It was the website where everybody wanted to store their bitcoin. It was the most popular place. Once you become the central bank of Bitcoin, basically, you become a target.
Any Bitcoin company was a target for hackers. I mean, this was just digital money that was just sitting there. This was kind of the simplest bounty system in the world where, you know, you got the password, you had the money. Certainly Mt. Gox was the biggest of them all, so it was the biggest target.
Si je me souviens bien, on était en moins $1 début 2011 et en juin, on était monté à $30. Du coup, des nouveaux besoins sont apparus d'un seul coup. Et en l'occurrence, la première solution qui est présentée, c'était de faire des cold wallets qui sont complètement séparés du système.
We started using something called a cold wallet, which means that the bitcoins in the wallet can only be accessed using physical means.
Donc pour ça, l'idée c'est d'abord d'acheter un ordinateur au hasard de la boutique, prendre son carton et s'assurer jusqu'à la fin que personne touche à l'intérieur du carton. Il faut aussi une imprimante, s'installer dans une pièce isolée, sortir aussi de l'ordinateur tout ce qui est matériel de communication. On passe à la génération des cold wallets. On met dans une enveloppe scellée, et après, il y a l'auditeur qui a servi à générer ce cold wallet, qu'il faut le détruire physiquement.
That prevented hackers from ever being able to access the cold wallet, because they would have had to have access to the physical piece of paper that had the secret not be able to get into that wallet. So bitcoins would initially go into the hot wallet or the main wallet, be kept there for a little while, and then be eventually sent to the cold wallet.
Bravo. Really, that was rich. What Fat Mark forgot to tell you was all that money he made was off guys like himself. Too stoned to go to the dealers.
Talking about me? Why should I freeze my ass off in the streets? With a couple of clicks on Silk Road, I can have my shit delivered to my door.
Silk Road was this website that was sort of incredibly, you know, you could order drugs as easily as you could order a book from Amazon. The only way that they would purchase drugs and other items on Silk Road was by using Bitcoin. That was the only currency that was accepted. You couldn't pay in dollars, you couldn't pay in euros, you couldn't pay using a Visa card, you had to pay in Bitcoin.
No credit card, no trace. He pays in Bitcoin. It's like he was a ghost.
I don't know, if Silk Road could have been what it was. This was the way that people turned their dollars into cocaine. This was the central mechanism that made that possible.
The Silk Road was probably the most successful startup company ever in the entire history of the world. It went from absolutely nothing to probably $1 billion+ in sales over the lifetime of the Silk Road. Wow, congratulations.
I don't think that Mark Karpeles tried to become the online bank to drug lords or anything, but that was certainly what it became.
Est-ce que Mongox a profité de l'ascension de Silk Road?
Indirectement, oui. Pour peu que je sache, pas loin, entre un tiers et la moitié des transactions sur Mongox étaient liées à Silk Road.
Popularity and success went towards making Mark feel he was important. He was originally interested in Lamborghini, for instance. He also bought himself a large house and a penthouse. And all of these things seem to say that he wanted to show everyone that he was making money and his status in the world was rising. So that sort of thing started happening more and more. Many of us started becoming uncomfortable, and Mark replied that his grandmother owns a castle in Austria and said that if we can't trust him, then there's nothing more for him to talk with us about. There was no way to tell how much money the company was making, how large its expenses were, or where the money was going in the company, because Mark was the only one with access to the accounts, and he refused to share that information with anyone else. He always thought that Bitcoin, because it wasn't a real currency, none of the laws really applied to it.
Special agent with IRS Criminal Investigation. We've been around for almost 100 years, and we go back to the days of organized crime, Al Capone. Of course, I have to put that out there. That was a famous IRS case, We're always on the lookout for emerging currencies or methods of payment that could be used to facilitate crime. When Bitcoin came out, at least in the early days, that was kind of like, how do we even track this? I mean, it's just numbers floating around in the Bitcoin world, and to us, that was kind of it was a hurdle.
Well, government was just starting to take notice of Bitcoin. And like with a lot of new technology, it's unclear how the law applies to it. And no one really cared that much until the Silk Road, because you had people selling drugs and telling Chuck Schumer he can't do anything about it. All he can do is kind of cry about it on the Senate.
Heroin, opium, cannabis, ecstasy, psychedelics, stimulants. They're all listed in the light of day. It's unbelievable. All hidden because they don't use dollars. They use this surrogate currency.
I think it was in the spring of 2013 that the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network put out a one-page regulation, just like one page, and they faxed it to everybody. They said if you're going to be exchanging dollars for Bitcoin and back again, you have to have a license. Getting this money, these licenses, costs more than $100,000 because you have to give a license in a physical state, and it's a terrible regulation.
There's lots of people in government that they get furious inside when they think people are doing stuff without my permission. People are engaged in free trade with each other without my permission. People are smoking or growing plants without my permission. They get angry and they want to steal money from other people in the form of taxes and then use that stolen money to lock those people that are growing plants without their permission and lock them in a cage, or people that have a